This episode of To The Point is sponsored by Tarsus. Tarsus Pharmaceuticals applies proven science and new technology to revolutionize treatment for patients, starting with eye care. Tarsus is advancing its pipeline to address several diseases with high unmet need across a range of therapeutic categories, including eye care, dermatology, and infectious disease prevention. Tarsus is proud to announce that Xdemvy, lotilaner ophthalmic solution 0.25% is available to prescribe.
As much as we've learned about ocular surface disease, there is still so much yet to be discovered. The good news is, this creates a world of opportunity for eye care providers.
The goal of this podcast is to better understand this chronic and complex condition and keep you up to date on the advances being made in its diagnosis and treatment. So let's get to the point. Welcome to another episode of the To The Point podcast. My name is Jackie Garlich, and I'm joined by my co-host, Jessilin Quint. Hi, Jessilin.
Hello, Jackie, and hello to all of our listeners. Are you guys surviving this heat and humidity? I don't know if this is dog days of summers yet, but
I know. Anytime it's a little bit too hot, I'm always like, fall could get here pretty soon. I feel like I would enjoy that, but yeah, we're surviving. And as I've spoken about, we're doing an office EHR switch, which is like it's on a different level of pain. So I could take some cooler weather just to like calm down my the chaos that's in my office at this moment.
EHR switch, never fun, but necessary. It'll be good once you guys are on the other side of that for sure.
It will definitely make us, I think, more efficient. And who's really efficient, actually? This is a great segue into our guest, because I had the wonderful opportunity to talk to him on, we were doing something else together, and we ended up staying on a call a whole lot longer because this wonderful guest is showing me all of his like efficiency tips and tricks on how he makes his life and practice run. And that's not even really why we're having him on the podcast today. But Jessilin, give the listeners a little clue into who we're having on their podcast today.
Yes. So our guest today, I'm not going to say his name quite yet because I want to see if our listeners can guess. I will say the biggest clue is I feel like he's like Mr. Aesthetics, plus dry eye, right? Like I feel like this is the first person that I think of when I think of somebody that's really rocked this space and done it really well. And it's been really cool. So this guest and I first met, gosh, I was trying to think like maybe 5 years ago. It was either like right before COVID or right after COVID. I can't remember, but it's been really awesome to see his journey. So he's a West Virginia native, but he currently lives in Virginia, like the normal Virginia, right? Where he co-owns a practice there called Eastern Virginia Eye Associates. But he has had a really impressive career. He's worked in a really prestigious eye center in Washington, D.C. He's worked with the NFL, but currently in Eastern Virginia Eye Associates, they do everything from primary care, but they also have a med spa that really does everything from skin rejuvenation, eye lifts, everything you could think of to making your whole aesthetic appearance really great. And he tackles the dry eye piece of it. So talk about in and out of patients, full service, look good, feel good, everything ocular surface disease. But, which I think we'll touch on, really cool, he's recently come up with this OD immersion, which has different programs to help with different protocols. So we're going to definitely pick his brain. But welcome to our episode of the To The Point podcast, Dr. Shane Swatts.
Yeah, thank you guys. It's such a pleasure being here. Jackie and I had a great conversation a few weeks ago, and Jess been following you for years, so I am very happy to be here. Thank you guys so much for having me on. I am excited to get started.
I will just say, Shane, you are someone who, so we met for the first time at this AOA, and then, we've just had some conversations since then, but you do really, I don't know if this is true about you, but you really seem like the person that has everything together. Is that true? Like you
Heck no.
seem, you, you
I
do
don't know. I
seem
think
like
he
it,
does.
right?
I am an introverted. Like if I could go live in a cabin in the woods by myself for the next 20 years, I would. Like that's
Really?
I know it's weird. Maybe I'm an ambivert. I think that's what we're called, right? But yeah, no, I do not have everything together. My practice is very much like everyone else's practice. There are storms going on. There's chaos going on over here, and it is putting out those fires on a day-to-day basis that we all go through. So you mentioned OD immersion. OD immersion is an advising group where we talk about dry eye. But the cool part about it is we're not advising from the outside, we're advising from the trenches. Like we're in there doing this practice every day, so we learn a lot from the people we work with as well.
Yeah, well, even if it's not true that you are super, have everything put together, it's certainly a relatable thing to hear is that you are, you're with the rest of us putting
Yeah,
out fires.
100%. Yeah, yeah.
Why don't you start? Can you tell us a little bit about your background, your practice? Like, give us a little rundown.
Sure. So, graduated from what is PCO, then turned Salus University, then turned Drexel. And 2001, I worked in every possible mode of practice you can imagine, meaning I did commercial care. I worked in ophthalmology for 7 years. I did nursing homes across the state of Virginia. I did optometry, group practices. And what I learned through all of that were all the things that I didn't want my practice to be like. So, through that, my wife and I, who's also an OD, started a practice, and it started off in a little shopping center. And then 20 years later, we're in our own building. We have 5 docs. We have med spa, PA, master esthetician, and it doesn't happen overnight, but it's a lot of fun in the process. I'm very much an 80-20 guy. I don't know if you guys know what that means, but I love the process of building something. And then once I get to a certain point, I'm like, okay, I'm going to delegate everything. You guys take it over. I'm going to go over here and start this other thing, right? So some people think of 80-20 as being a negative thing. I think of it as being a very positive thing because I like to start things up, get them to a certain level, and then move on to the next thing. So I love building. That's really my passion.
I love that. And within your practice, I mean, you've really carved out this dry eye piece, right? And your whole mode of practice, whether it's on the primary eye care side or somebody's in your dry eye clinic, is very ocular surface focused. And then of course from that, you've kind of branched into the world of aesthetics and have brought in, multiple providers for that. So how did that transition happen? Like you said, it probably didn't happen overnight. So what did that look like? Walk us
It,
through that part of it.
it was very, very interesting. I'm glad you asked that because a lot of people ask me that question. So I was the first device I ever bought was a Luminous IPL. Right, the rep came into my office. I bought it that same day. I was like, okay, I'm doing it. And about 3 months later, I got contacted by the aesthetic side of Luminous, and they said, hey, would you come and tour with us? Like, we want to introduce this technology as far as around the eyes to aesthetic people. And so I was like, okay, I'll give it a shot. And basically, what I was challenged with was presenting a lecture to derms, plastics, estheticians, basically the whole aesthetic world on dry eyes. Right now, they're not used to hearing a thing about dry eyes. So, and part of what I had to lecture to them on was all the things they're doing that contributes to dry eye, right? So it was not an easy landscape to kind of navigate, but it was fun. And I'll tell you where most of what I know now came from was not from lecturing. It was from the dinners after the lecture when I got to sit and talk to all those people and you get all the behind the scenes stuff. That's really where it came from. And so from that, I just started, taking some of what I learned, building it into the practice. You guys mentioned earlier, not being kind of a no person. You didn't mention it here, but when we were talking beforehand. And so if I'd have a patient I was doing IPL on for dry eye, they would mention, well, do you guys do Botox or filler? And I had no plans whatsoever, but I wouldn't say no. I would say not yet. Check back with us in about 3 months. Because if they're asking me for it, I'm going to make sure it happens, right? And so that's kind of the process that I went through, which was, we all know dry eye is really the gateway drug to aesthetics. It really is. And then once they hit aesthetics, there's a very addictive quality about aesthetics. Once you get a little hit of it, you want more and you want more and you want more. And you almost have to tell people no when it gets to certain categories of treatment. But that's kind of how I got into the world of aesthetics, and then started really collaborating with Chantel Garcia, who is just a brilliant business mind. She's in North Carolina, has an amazing practice. I met her at my very first aesthetic lecture I ever did in New York, and I think we've probably not gone any longer than about 4 days without talking since then. And this was in 2001. And so we just both had a passion for education. We both had a passion for, hey, when we started IPL, we were on our own. We didn't have anybody teaching us. What are the protocols? What do my packages look like? What's my pricing? What coupling gel do I use? Is it pink? Is it blue? Is it clear? Do I need corneal shields? All these questions, we kind of had to live and learn, make all the mistakes. And then we, at the same time, we're doing a lot of KOL calls for companies and realized a lot of the same questions were coming through. So we were like, you know what, we need to formalize something. Let's formalize something so that we can teach people how to do these things. And that's really how OD Immersion was born, was the need for eye care providers to really not just know that IPL is a thing, but really dig deep into it. How does it work? How do I utilize this? How do I move my practice into aesthetics? So that's kind of been my journey up till now.
So how do providers, utilize these services? Are they consulting you? Are actually, like, is Luminous using your service? Because it's a benefit to everyone if people can do a better job at implementation. I mean, that is always the hurdle. I hear that a lot from colleagues, and I have an IPL, but I don't really feel like I know how to use it, or I'm not confident using it. So how does someone get to you?
Yeah, and so great point that you just made, which is we are not a general advising company. We are an implementation advising company, right? Because implementation is the beast when it comes to bringing in these advanced dry eye or aesthetic services. It really is the beast. So we have three main buckets of people who reach out to us. One are the people who want to move into the dry space, have no idea of the difference between IPL and RF and microneedling, don't know what devices are out there. They just don't know where to go. And so that's our bucket number one. Our bucket number two are the people, kind of what you just mentioned, who get a device, they get excited, and then it turns into a coat rack in the corner, right? It's just sitting there. And what breaks my heart is when I talk to someone and they said, yeah, I bought my IPL a year ago. I'm like, great. How many treatments have you done? I've done 3, my dad, my cousin, and one of my staff members. I was like, oh. And then the third bucket of people are the ones who did really well with the dry part of it and the implementation, and they just want to expand into aesthetics. And they're not sure of all those details of medical director. What can a PA do? What can an NP do? What's the difference in a collaborative and an independent NP? And every state is different, so it does make it pretty complex. But if you can think of when you guys first got your IPL, what was going through your mind, right? What's my pricing? What's my packaging? How do I present this to a patient? How do I get my team excited? Where are my consent forms? How do I actually charge these people? Do they got to walk to my front desk? What's my patient flow like? So those are all the things from start to finish that ODI does, and we really had a good foundation for it because we had just gone through that whole process ourselves and realized what was needed. And so we've actually, yes, we do partner with a couple companies in terms of providing those services, but we don't have exclusive relationships with anyone. So we are very device agnostic. So it doesn't matter what device you have, the protocols, the the process for converting patients is the same. The language is the same, right? IPL, there are IPLs that I feel are better than others, but ultimately what's different is the person sitting under that light, right? Like, what is their condition? What is their severity level? Are they mild, moderate, severe? Were the correct expectations set? We use a lot of neurofinance principles in terms of how we speak to patients. These are not manipulation principles. We don't want to manipulate anybody. We want to make connections, small things for example, one of the things I used to do, this is a mistake I used to make, and I realized it from videotaping myself at a dry eval. I used to walk in the room, introduce myself, shake my hand, right? Hey, I'm Dr. Swatts, nice to meet you. And then I would turn my back to the patient, reach up in my cabinet, grab my gloves as I'm still talking to them, which is probably one of the worst things you can do for communicating with a patient. What I do now when I walk in the room is I want to stimulate dopamine. I want to stimulate oxytocin. I want their good vibes going so that they learn to trust me. Sometimes all that is eye contact and a little touch on the wrist, a little touch on the knee, a little, there's so many principles that you can use that garner trust that a lot of people just don't know about, right? And so not only do we talk about, how do you make this work in your office, but we really get into the nitty gritty of like the science of people. How do you really understand how to communicate? And that's a big part of it.
For me, when I first bought this really expensive IPL, I was on board. Like I was like, I'm so excited about this. But I remember prior to having this IPL, I had a thermal expression. And at the time, before I brought in the IPL, I was like, oh gosh, my biggest hurdle was always price, like talking about price or asking someone to pay for something out of pocket. And that always, I always felt uncomfortable with that. And so I remember when I, had tear care, I was like, oh gosh, well, it's this much for the treatment. And then when I got IPL, I was like, oh God, these tear cares are flying off the shelf because like now IPL is so much more expensive. And I'm obviously like, oh, the cheaper option is this one that I used to be so scared. So it's like such a doctor mentality, I think, or for me anyway, that just to be uncomfortable discussing, price like that. But that's where I think your program really and your, implementation strategies can really help someone who is struggling with that.
Yeah, I mean, I was the guy when I was doing primary care, I was the person so scared to talk about money that if I were in the room with a patient and they had a concern about like a $15 copay, I would go get my admin and say, hey, can you go talk to them? Because I don't want to have that conversation. So I went from that to being able to present a, $2,700 package to a patient without blinking, without any concern whatsoever. And so part of that is seeing results from treatment, building confidence, and that's what a lot of us lack is that confidence in prescribing a treatment that we know works, right? And not giving it as an option, right? Right? A lot of us are saying, yeah, we have this IPL thing. You can do that, or you can do some home therapy, or, I can just put you on Restasis. That is not how to prescribe treatment. I often use the analogy of glaucoma, right? If you have a patient sitting in your chair and you look at their retinal image and their 0.8 cups and they have retinal neurofibrillary defects and their pressures are 30, when you walk in that room, are you hesitating at all with your recommendations? You're not. You're saying it exactly the way it should be said with confidence. I just think in the dry eye space, a lot of us, or not me, but a lot of us, a lot of doctors out there hear the term dry and it's not super sexy, it's super common. And so we don't elevate it in our mind the way we do with things like glaucoma, right? But who do you think has more symptoms on a daily basis? The glaucoma patient or the dry eye patient, right? So we should be taking it even more seriously because, I don't know if you guys have gone on any social media sites. There's a really good one called Dry Eye Support Community and read that it's all patients. The suffering that patients go through with this disease is significant, right? And so part of what we teach doctors too is this is not just dry eye. It's not just dry eye. This is dry eye disease. This is a big deal. And you need to treat it as such when you're making your recommendation or when you're prescribing treatment, which is how we talk about it, is making an actual prescribed treatment, not suggesting.
I think you really hit the nail on the head with that of a lot of times we just have to get out of our own way with the price, right? You can't assume, you can't judge what a patient's, you can't be scared. You do need to have confidence. Looking back and seeing how you've grown your confidence, and obviously when we get more experience and we see the results, like that definitely helps. But are there any like mindset, like tactics you use, like in those first couple of like how to basically pitch that price, right? Like, is there anything like you told yourself or what you practice doing? Like something that you could give to somebody who's maybe still struggling with that because they just haven't quite crossed that hurdle to like
Yeah.
have the confidence yet.
It's very interesting because I think all of us go through ebbs and flows, right? Like there's times where my recommendations are on point and there's times where I just suck at it. It really is. No matter what I know, my language is not right. I didn't do the right things when I walked in the room. Judging patients, you're exactly right. I am a big, just naturally, I think it's an instinct we all have. Is you're watching them and you're looking at nonverbal cues. You're looking at, are they kind of veering down at you with their head down? Like, what in the heck did you just say? I will tell you, probably the most powerful thing that changed as I learned was say less. I almost felt like I had to over explain everything because this was a high ticket item. And what I was doing was actually taking away from what the patient was taking from me, right? I was overwhelming them. So by the end of my eval, their eyes are glazed over. They don't know what the heck I just said. So whenever, I mean, even just explaining dry, I often ask people when, they join OD immersion, I was like, if you had to give me a definition of dry, what would it be? And I mean, the answers are crazy. They're like, well, it's your meibomian glands and your inflammation and your lids. It's your eyes' inability to produce quality tears. Simple, right? That's all it is. Much like when we're explaining glaucoma. If somebody has glaucoma in our office, we don't go into all the types of glaucoma. We don't go into chronic open angle. We don't go into angle closure. We don't explain every possible mechanism of glaucoma. We mostly talk about open angle glaucoma, right? And so for dry eye, yeah, that definition might not cover all the types, but it's enough for a patient to understand, to take in and say, okay, I get it. So my evals used to be an hour. They're now 20 minutes. Yeah. And my conversions are higher at 20 minutes than they are at an hour, right? So really, I think that's the main thing is don't try to over explain it. Don't try to convince the patient that you know what you're doing, or that this recommendation is somehow that you have to somehow justify the price by what you're saying. I mean, just say what you got to say and get out of there. That's really probably my most valuable lesson. I would say number two is setting the correct expectations for the patient. Us as eye doctors, when we're looking at a patient, our goals are, okay, I want to get rid of the keratitis. I want to get the oils moving. I want to all these clinical things. Patients have no clue what any of that means, right? Their goals are, I want to wear my contacts longer. I don't want my eyes to be red. And so I could have succeeded at all of my goals, but if I didn't succeed at theirs, then it's a failed treatment in my eyes, right? And I don't want to go back and have to convince them it's a good treatment. So one of the things we do for every patient is get goals, 1 to 2 treatment goals. What to you is a successful treatment? And I don't say that. My technicians go in and have that conversation and do their own way, their own script. But and so when we've finished treatment and go back into the exam room, we don't walk in and say, how's the dry eye? We look back at their health goals and say, how's the tearing? Or how long are you able to wear your contacts, right? Now, they may have a million other complaints because dry is so multifactorial. All right, cool. We can address those. Our initial goal was to do this, and we're there. So now let's keep going, right? So I think those are two really important points. Making sure your goals are aligned with the patient's goals and that they understand it too. Again, if I have a severe patient, I don't say, yeah, your glands are a little blocked. I say, whoa, you fall at a severe level. You're going to need to be under my care for the next 8 months or 9 months, maybe even longer than that. And these first sessions that we do for you, you're probably not going to notice any improvement. We're going to turn the needle a little bit. We're going to get you there, but it's going to take some time because this is not new. It's been around a while. This is a marathon, not a sprint. Probably words you guys use too. But I think patients need to hear that.
The communication piece is huge. And regardless of what healthcare professional you are, like you can be the best clinician, but if you can't communicate it right to get the goal across, to get the treatment across, then it's really just almost a lost cause. And I think with dry eye, because it sometimes involves so much of an investment and equipment, staff training, manpower, right? Like, especially if you're carving out this whole thing, it is well worth the investment to spend the time and like kind of looking at your communication style or protocols, because that can really make or break all of it. And so it's one of those, I feel like those soft skills, right, that we often kind of overlook, but at the end of the day it's probably one of the most important. And so I love that you have like a whole, kind of consultation program set to that, and really can just speak from experience how little words matter, little mannerisms, your body language, all of it really
Yeah,
ties.
it really does. And I think some of the best lessons I've learned in eye care come from outside of our industry. Just looking at how other industries do things, not necessarily marketing or not necessarily sales, just in general. Researching and studying other industries to get my mind off of autopilot and start thinking differently. But it does take, nothing new. It does take a little bit of getting uncomfortable to do this type of work. And but once you're past that uncomfortable, kind of like you said with tear care at one point was way up here in terms of your concern level, and as soon as you bring in this other stuff, now it comes down, and the same thing is going to continue to happen as new technologies come out. Right now we have DMST, a lot more expensive than normal IPL, so people are going through that whole process now.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, this whole story that you're telling of like, oh gosh, this consult was taking so long. This was absolutely me in the beginning. And so this lesson of brevity is so important, I think, for people that are listening, because your patients are not retaining. So this is where in my opinion, I do love a good handout, to sort of recap. And then the goal setting is huge. I do the same thing, like, so that I know why is it, like, what are they upset about? Otherwise I look like an idiot when I'm like, we did great. And then they're like, not really, if I can like back up for 1 second before, I don't want to take up too much of your time, but I am curious, as you've grown your practice, you've brought in more doctors, and I'm wondering how you keep all the doctors on the same page. Or if they're all seeing dry eye patients, do you have protocols established? I'm thinking about a person who wants to add other practitioners in but doesn't want to lose, the sort of rhythm or the protocols that they've created. How did you handle that when you started bringing more people on?
Yeah, so when we started bringing more people on, myself and Dr. Ramos, who's my wife, dedicated ourselves to dry eye and aesthetics, right? And so we essentially kind of moved ourselves out of primary care, and so our primary care docs do have protocols that they use, and they refer their patients to us. So if they have somebody that we don't have them send us every dry eye patient, right? If they have someone that is not severe that they feel like they can treat them. I want the train wrecks, right? Send me the people who have failed at other therapies, because those are the ones who are going to convert more easily. Number one, they're the ones who need the help. Number two, I think my worst evals are the ones where they have SPK1 and 20% gland loss, and they'll send me the patient. The patient's like, "Why am I here? Like, I have zero symptoms whatsoever." I'm like, "Well, you have some gland loss, but those are the ones that are really, really tough. Not that asymptomatics shouldn't be treated. Asymptomatics are just a different category of conversation, right? So it is it's yes, we have our doctors trained, and to answer your question more directly, meetings, meetings, meetings. We have just a ton of educational meetings. Every Tuesday morning, we meet with our whole team. Every Wednesday, we meet with our supervisors. On Tuesdays, twice a month, we meet with our doctors. So it's a lot of just ongoing education. And that's the thing, if you're a practice owner, the education never stops. I would say 70% of what I do on a daily basis is teaching my team, right? So that's really the biggest part of it.
That's very true.
It
Man,
is. Yeah.
I feel like we could spend hours kind of picking your brain because, and we will probably won't even get to this, but for those who are interested out there, like bring on a medical director. And as you said, like the different types of aesthetic providers, right? And all it, the aesthetics industry is like a whole other beast in of itself. And it's different, right? And it has its own learning curve. And sometimes that can be really tough to kind of figure out if you're wanting to dip your toe in and kind of explore that world. So if somebody maybe wanted to kind of just connect with you and ask you questions on that, how could they find you or like reach out to you?
Yeah, the first way to reach out is to go to OD Immersion website, which is odimmersion.com. And from there, you can schedule a call. We can chat. We don't do things like pressure sales. It's a conversation. Hey, let's talk about it. Maybe we can help you. Maybe we can't. You know what I mean? So that's kind of how we operate as far as OD immersion. We get a lot of people who call us now, and they are interested in things like IPL and RF. They have zero interest in dry eye. They'll call us and they'll say, "Hey, I want to open up a freestanding aesthetic clinic." I mean, we get more of that than we do I'm interested in dry eye now. So what we try to do with them is back them up a little bit, right? Because for us, really the gateway drug is dry eyes. It really is. Now, can you go out and do your own aesthetic thing? You can, but it's complex, right? I mean, you got a lot of things to think about. The medical director, and here's one point I'll make about a medical director that I see a lot of people do, which is you can go online and get a medical director in 20 minutes now, right? They're not hard to get. But if you look at their qualifications, a lot of them are GI doctors, a lot of them are primary care doctors, a lot of them have never touched the world of aesthetics in their life. My recommendation from a medical director standpoint is be sure the person who's overseeing what you're doing has experience in what you're doing. Because if anything ever gets litigated and you have a GI doctor as your medical director who's never injected a person, doesn't know the first thing, there's going to be concerns, right? So be careful with the medical director side of it. Um, I will say your relationships with those people is also important because if you guys have ever had somebody on your team like a PA and you have to buy inventory for things like neurotoxin and filler, it's like 15 grand. I mean, easily. So let's say you hire that person and you make that investment and a month later they're gone. Well, you're stuck with 15 grand of inventory. So, part of what we do in OD immersion is help people to structure those relationships so that they can end that relationship as quickly as possible if needed, with no skin in the game, no financial skin in the game, and it's legal at the same time, right? And it's complex because every state is different. There's APRNs, there's independent NPs, there's collaborative NPs, there's PAs. They can do different things in all states. It just gets really, it is the wild, wild west. And you mentioned something in the beginning that the aesthetic world is different. The aesthetic world is fast and dirty. It really is. It's a different world. It's not like working with Lombard, right? To buy your exam room equipment. They're not, aesthetics are sell, 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 sell. Let's get this in your office. And they will tell you, I mean, being completely forthcoming, they will tell you just about anything to get those devices in your office. And once it lands, it's yours. It's hard to go back. So it is more aggressive than what I think most ODs are used to. And so part of what we do in OD immersion is when somebody gets ready to buy a device, we do negotiating for them. So if we usually will get a much better deal than they would have otherwise, because there's things they just don't know to ask. Hey, can you throw in this filter? Can you throw in this light guide? Can you throw this in? Which is an extra 3 grand that they didn't even know they needed, right? So I will say something else that I think is really important. I think a lot of people out there right now doing things like, let's talk about IPL for a second. I think most people are 560, 590 people. That's their zone. It's like right here. They don't venture out into the 640s and the 515s and some of the things that really give you amazing results. That's part of what we teach too. Because if you have this expensive device, which is a great investment, you want to be able to get the full utility of it, right? You really want to be able to maximize the use of it. And if you're pulsing everybody with 590 and 560, you're probably not getting the best use out of it. Are you treating some dry eyes? Heck yeah, you are. And you're doing a great job at it. But we have so many other capabilities with these devices that most, I would say, a majority of people out there don't know right now.
Shane, are you doing any upcoming lectures anywhere, academy, any meetings? Like, can people attend any lectures that you do?
Yeah, so I was just at AOA. We always, at AOA every year, we do kind of a beginner's course in IPL. And this year they allowed us to do RF. So we added some RF in there. It's hands on. So yes, usually I don't find out about them until a couple months before. So I don't have anything upcoming right now. It's usually a vendor calling me saying, "Hey, can you come to the booth and can you talk to all these people and can you do this?" Sometimes when I'm on my way to the event, I get like 3 or 4 more. I'm sure you guys do too. You get like, "Oh, can you do this little stage thing?" Um, we are planning. OD Immersion is planning an event soon, and it's going to be advanced. It's going to be dry in aesthetics, and the aesthetic part of it, I think, is going to be the real game changer. Because do you guys know of any courses out there right now where eye doctors can go purely to learn aesthetics on their devices, and all of the complexities of offering aesthetics as a service in your practice? It's complex, and so we're going to be doing an event soon that people can come to, and we're gonna have derms there, we're gonna have plastics there, we're gonna have PAs, we're gonna have all the people who do this stuff, so that they can hear firsthand what this world is like. A lot of people don't realize what the aesthetic world is like, and then they get into it and they're like, "Whoa, this was a lot. You know, this is more than I bargained for."
Yeah.
And so, yeah. So with OD Immersion, we're by no means an easy button. It's accountability. Like if we don't hear from you in a couple of weeks, you're getting a call from us and saying, "Where are you at? Let's get going. Let's get moving." Because and I love weekend workshops. I think they're great. And there's a few of them, quite a few of them out there for dry eye. But what we learn, and I think everybody should do those, but it's like drinking through a fire hose, right? I mean, and the hard part about those is you're going to get a lot of education. You're then responsible for coming back and implementing all that. And so that's why we intentionally made our program. It's a minimum 6 months. And through that 6 months, we put you through logistics, through language, through launch, which is actually the treatment protocols. We go through team training. We go through, I mean, we do weekly kind of, Jackie, I'm such a fan of your glance. I love it. I mean, it's the one thing in my email I actually look forward to coming in there. I'm like, "Oh, there's the email." Um, but we send out videos that are like that every week, and each week is something different. One week it may be, canalicular gel. The next week it is rosacea. The next week it is milia. The next week, something different. We try to mix in aesthetics and dry eye, and we have a few aesthetic people who actually do some of those videos as well.
I love it. Such a wealth of knowledge.
See, he's
Yeah,
got it all together. I'm telling you, he's saying no, but it's not true.
he does. So
Always more to do. Always more to do.
So with that, moving maybe outside dry eye aesthetics or maybe not, I want to know what your life lens is. I just am so curious because you are king on protocols and figuring out like the ins and outs, right? Like the 80/20. So what would your life lens be or what
Okay,
is it?
so I think Life Lens has very little to do with protocols, business practices, and I think it has a lot to do with knowing who you are. So I'll tell you a quick story. I used to go to California every 3 months, and I hooked up with a group out there. They were all married businessmen, who are entrepreneurs. Those were the requirements to be in this group. And we did a lot of crazy stuff. I mean, they would throw us out of helicopters into water. We had Navy SEALs there yelling in our face. The dogs were there. We just did crazy, crazy, crazy stuff. So one day, and everything we did was called an evolution. So one of the evolutions we did was called the last letter. Have you guys ever heard of this? All right. So we're blindfolded in a van going to some unknown site. We get to the site, we take our blindfolds off, we're at a graveyard, we're at a cemetery. And they actually have a casket and the whole, like the umbrella set up and chairs set up, right? And so our coach comes to the front and he says, okay, guys, here's this evolution. I want you guys to imagine we leave here today and we get hit by a tractor trailer and we all die. So this is you in the casket. You have one opportunity to write your last letter to your wife and your kids. And the things that you learn from doing that are unbelievable. It really helps you to set your priorities in your life. And that for me was just so after that, we go off in the graveyard in the cemetery, sit with the journal and write for about an hour. Our last letter to our wife and kids, which they never see. But it was probably one of the most impactful things I've ever done in my life in terms of what am I really working for every day, right? Why do I wake up in the morning? Yeah, why do I work out? Why do I do all these things? And it is for my wife and my girls. 100%. Life lens would be really understand. We all, I think, are guilty of letting work take over,
Yeah,
right? It
totally.
really is. I mean, whether it's and I remember this when my girls were little, and I had so much going on at the office, and I was like, oh yeah, I'll play with you for 5 minutes, but I had to go do this. If my girls ask me to do something now, I drop everything and I'm like, I'm with you, because you never know what's going to happen. And so, going internal and really thinking about what are the most important things to you. Here's the other thing that came out of that event is I came back from that event and I told my wife and my administrator, and we had 25 employees. I was like, guys, I'm not seeing patients anymore. I'm done with patient care. They thought I had lost my absolute mind. Like they literally thought I lost my mind. But I had learned from that I did not enjoy the monotony of seeing patients on a daily basis. I wanted to do something that was more not surgical in nation, but special in nature, but specialized. And that's what actually led me into the dry space, was realizing that, you got to realize what you want to do and what you don't do. If I was going to the office every day spinning lenses, and some people enjoy that, and that's 100%. I get it. It is not what I enjoy. I enjoy building things. I enjoy seeing my specialty patients, the real train wrecks who need me badly, and helping them and my family. Those are really what I got out of that whole experience.
I was totally kidding. That was like, that's like such a sweet story. And I feel like I've come to some of those realizations too. Like if everything ends or tomorrow I find out I have some terrible illness, like what matters to me? What am I doing with my life? I think that's what you were saying as well. And that's incredible advice. We should all really do a deep look into why we do what we do, and we cut out things that we don't want to do and make changes and realize it. The sooner you realize it, the better you are. So
And
that's,
when you do that, you realize really quickly it's easy to say no to certain things, right?
yeah,
When you have your priorities straight. So I do not have my stuff together, Jackie, by any means, but I do know what falls first in my life and then what falls after. And that controls everything.
yeah, you know what your pillars are and what you're willing to compromise and what you won't. So great. That's great advice. It's really wonderful. I probably could use another little, deep dive and sort of, recheck our priorities. So it's great advice.
It's a
Thank you.
little morbid way of getting there, but it
Right, I
teaches
know.
a lesson, right?
Well, I mean, I this sounds like an intense experience
An
of
intense
living
experience.
in helicopters, but it sounds awesome. Like it sounds like a once in a lifetime experience. So it's great.
It changed a lot of things for me, and I'm very happy I did it, and my wife is very happy I did it too. And it's not only what might happen to me tomorrow, but I think it's also the regret of getting 10 years down the road and thinking, man, I had all that time. Like my oldest daughter's in college now, my youngest is in 10th grade. I don't get a whole lot of my older daughter, so and I wish I would have had that knowledge 10 years ago when she was 8, right? Because I would have done things differently. Yeah.
Yeah. That's great
Sorry,
advice.
this turned into a family podcast instead of a drive.
So sweet. It's so sweet. Shane, you're so generous with your time. I appreciate you coming on the podcast and talking all of your expertise, and then, certainly ending us in a lovely, heartwarming spot. It's a great life lens. I love it.
Great. Well, thank you guys so much. I really enjoyed it. And anytime, I love doing this. So anytime you guys need somebody, let me know.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Shane.